Hey, this is Troy Erickson from copywriting.org. And today I'm back on the Secrets of Scale podcast with an awesome guest of mine that has been known his whole career for working 34 years at Boardroom, essentially helping them go from 5 million to over 160. But more important to himself is the amount of things he's experimented with as a marketer and genuinely enjoys. It's like anything from traditional online copy to infomercials, all the way up to the point of sending 1.3 billion pieces of direct mail. It's absolutely crazy how many things Brian Kurtz has experimented with. And today, of course, knows Titans Marketing, has a mastermind and is well known for that. And he is going to be enlightening us on a lot of things that have to do with copywriting and things with marketing in general. So, Brian, I'm super happy to have you here.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here, Troy. I followed your career too, and you spoke to my mastermind, my online mastermind, on your I won't say your toolkit to get more email opened, and email marketing is I cut my teeth in direct mail. Some people listening to this are saying, direct mail, is that new? Because it's so old, it's new. But cutting my teeth in direct mail, but to me, email is the killer app today. I think for personalization, and I mean, there's a lot of different media, and that's been my not my claim to fame, because I don't really have much fame, but I have I'm proud of the fact that I've tested so many different media, and frankly, a lot of it didn't work. And I mentioned briefly that the back of ATM receipts and underneath yogurt lids were only good ideas at the time, and nobody keeps an ATM receipt, and a yogurt lid has shit all over it. So how are you going to get a response on that? And you can't send it in either, so as a coupon. So but I would test anything and everything, and especially and it's testing, being a serial tester, a serial direct marketer and tester. I think really has been my secret to longevity. A lot of the people I grew up with in the direct mail world in the 1980s and 90s, I don't think you were born yet in the 1980s. Were you?
I was not, no.
Oh, man. My first day at Boardroom was 1981, March 30th, the way Ronald Reagan was shot.
Oh, wow.
Did Ronald Reagan was shot in 1980?
I didn't know the exact day, that's for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, I just was so fortunate, though. It was a great period because it was like I was in the horse and buggy days, and I saw all, right into the internet and email. I lived through it. The interesting thing is a lot of the people I grew up with in the 80s and 90s in the direct mail business, in the direct marketing list business, and I was a list manager in direct mail. A lot of them didn't make it, and they, by their own choice, they decided that this internet thing and this email thing is way too complex. I don't want to learn anything new. And I did the opposite. I jumped into student mode. 10 years ago, I joined Jeff Walker's mastermind for Product Launch Formula. And he let me in, thank goodness, based on my track record. And I had no launch experience. So I got in on my old news, which was fortunate, and because I couldn't get in on the normal criteria, and I became a student in that group. And I think always being a student has also served me well, because the people that kind of gave up, who I grew up with in the direct mail business, they couldn't cope with, and they just stayed in the direct mail business, and they retired, both figuratively and literally. Where I've been able to, forge a career as an educator and a mastermind leader of people who are a lot smarter than me with their dexterity, you included, in online marketing. But I can hold my own when it comes to like the eternal truths that I learned of copywriting, of basically, lifetime value and RFM and all the basic tenets of direct response marketing, which are all true today. They're just, with technology, people think that technology is a medium. It's not. It's something that you use, and if you use it right, it's fantastic. I was talking to Caleb O'Dowd yesterday, who's a great copywriter, a good friend of mine, and he was saying, like, people think that a funnel, for example, is like this magical thing. I mean, people were doing funnels in the 1960s. They were cross-selling, they were upselling. They don't have the technology to do it with the speed and even accuracy, if you do it right, that you can do today. But there's so much that you can take from the past. And one of the things I do with my Titans marketing, I have the exclusive rights to breakthrough advertising, which is one of the best books ever written on copywriting by Gene Schwartz. I work with Gene Schwartz. He was a mentor of mine. He was my friend. I have the exclusive rights to breakthrough advertising, which I'm so proud of, because his wife said, you're the only person I'll trust with this. And we've sold, probably 10,000 copies all over the world. Gene Schwartz is more popular today than when he was alive. And the book was written in 1966. And I'm sure you know the book, as every good copywriter needs to know the book. And it's 100% relevant, levels of sophistication and mass desire and levels of awareness of your audience and how to write to the different segments. I mean, all of that, Ryan Levesque put that on steroids with, quiz funnels and how do you write to each of the segments. I mean, Gene was so ahead of his time. I always say he was a direct marketer trapped in a general advertiser's body because he was a madman, the show Mad Men, which was about, the advertising agency in the 60s. So it's, there's so much to be gained by looking at the past, taking from the past what you need and what you can use, adapt it to the present. And that's been kind of my role. I don't want to be a dinosaur, even though my email is T-Rex. And I have all these dinosaurs behind me, as you can see.
That's true.
This going to be on video?
Of course.
Okay. Yeah. So those are all my dinosaurs.
Yeah, like I said,
go ahead.
Your office is probably one of the coolest in the game. And I know you hear that a lot when people talk to you on Zoom, but the little stories that you just told right now are like so valuable, even though it was like just a few minutes. Now, you also mentioned before this that you've pretty much worked with every single like famous copywriter that everybody today knows. Some of them get a lot of credit, like Eugene Schwartz, Claude Hopkins, etc. And a lot of them don't get enough credit. So what is the long list of people that you've worked with? And then you also mentioned that there's 7 traits that they share in common that make a really good writer.
Yeah. So great question. So, I don't want to be a name dropper, but I have, just because
it's okay.
60,
you can.
Yeah. Well, I'm 64 years old and I've worked in this business for over 40 years. So, and I paid attention to what I'm doing. So if you do that, anybody could do what I did,
Exactly.
So, but I have 2 Mount Rushmores. I'll start with those. So my first Mount Rushmore at Boardroom were 4 writers, 3 of which everybody should know well, and 1 you might not know that well. So I'll answer that question at the same time. So it's Gene Schwartz, Gary Bencivenga, Jim Rutz. Now, everybody should know Jim Rutz, but a lot of people don't. And then Mel Martin. And a lot of people don't know who Mel Martin was. And those 4 writers, were probably they were responsible for, I don't know how many tens of millions of direct mail pieces that we sent out. But they were 4 of the most skilled writers that I ever worked with. And then in my second 20 years at Boardroom, there was a new Mount Rushmore, and everybody would hear of these guys, and that was Paris Lampropoulos, David Deutsch, Arthur Johnson, and Eric Betwell. And then I had I only put 4 on the Mount Rushmore, but then there was Clayton Makepeace, and there was Jim Punckery, and there was Kim Krause-Schwamm, and Carlene Cole, and just so many wonderful copywriters, and everyone was unique. Of course, we're all unique. But I came up with, I wrote them down one day, and this is how I came up with a blog post out of it, at least. And I came up with, I wrote them all down on a piece of paper. I came up with, I don't know, probably 40 or 50 copywriters that I had worked with during my career, some well-known, some not. And I said, what do they all have in common? What are the traits that they all have in common? And I came up with 7. I'll go through them quickly. And people who know me and they read my blog, who are listening to this, probably heard this before, but it's a good reminder of the things that I think being a copywriter, it's multidimensional, because just saying, Dan Kennedy always says, to be a copywriter and just write for food is just not, it's just not, it's, first of all, today, it's so competitive online that you can't make a living just writing. You're going to drive yourself crazy. And also you're not going to, if you don't have enough behind it, meaning that you can't be like a trusted advisor, a consultant, a coach to your clients, your value is not as great as the ones who can. And these 7 traits help them get that extra oomph, in terms of their ability to be a trusted advisor and not just someone who writes for food. So the 7 are hunger, and hunger is number 1. And it's really, I always bring up Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, which says that to master anything in life takes 10,000 hours of practice. And I don't know if it's 10,000 hours, if it's 5,000 hours, but to be a great copywriter, you've got to spend more than 15 minutes. You got to spend more than taking John Carlton's copywriting course. You've got to spend more time than studying John Benson's VSL course. You got to do so much. You got to do those things, but you got to do so much more. You got to be able to go deep as opposed to go wide first. And I'll talk about that in a second. That goes to passion, which is one of the other 7. But you got to have hunger. You got to really want to write copy, and you got to really want to because I think the best copywriters, I thought they were magicians. Anybody who could write something that would make someone take their wallet out and take their credit card out and send money. I always call myself a copywriter wannabe, because I never wrote soup to nuts promotion. I mean, I write very well, I think, but I know good copy, but I've never called myself a copywriter, because these copywriters, when I use the term copywriter, they're on Mount Rushmore for me. They're all on a mountaintop for me. I look up to them because they had this talent, and hunger was number 1. Number 2 could have been number 1, and that's insatiable curiosity. And when I hear about like the great copywriters that come out of Agora, for instance, and we all hear about them, and you hear about how Agora hires copywriters. And I don't know how you do this in an interview, but you can do it when they're interviewing people for their copy teams. They have to understand that this person is not going to stop. They're going to be, Woodward and Bernstein uncovering, Watergate. They're going to never stop until they get to the truth. And, and it's not just research for the sake of research. You've got to go deep into who the avatar you're writing for. This is something I talked about with Caleb O'Dowd yesterday. And, we have a breakthrough advertising boot camp that we do. And we have this exercise that we say, if you want to, let's say it's a lose weight package of some sort. So I want to lose weight because I want to look better. And you say, so I'm not going to be embarrassed when I put on my clothes. So I can go to the beach and take my shirt off. So and you go deeper and deeper, and you find out that if we'll say it's a diet pill or something for an older audience, and it could get down to, I want to be alive to see my kids get married, those kinds of inner things. I used a broad example, but got into some detail there to show that insatiable curiosity, you always have to keep asking questions. I always said that one of the best traits of a copywriter that every copywriter I've worked with is they're great interviewers. Like if you can ask questions. I mean, Jay Abraham, who's one of my mentors, who wrote the foreword for my book Over Deliver, uses a Socratic method of always asking deep probing questions before he gives an opinion. And it's so interesting that just being a great interviewer, like the copywriters who got the best out of for our stuff, interviewed the doctor that was behind the product. They interviewed the panel of experts. They interviewed Marty Edelston, who's the founder of Boardroom, and they got deep with him. In fact, Gene Schwartz wrote the original package that launched Boardroom. It was for Boardroom Reports, which was a business newsletter. And he spent like 2 days just interviewing Marty, because Marty had this vision for this newsletter. But Marty understood copy, but he wasn't really going to write the package. That's why he hired Gene Schwartz. I mean, why do it yourself when you can hire the best in the world? But so Gene interviews him for 2 days, comes back, writes the package. It becomes the control for launches the company. And everybody's like saying, Gene, you wrote the most amazing package for Boardroom Reports. And he said, I didn't write it. Marty wrote it. I just took what he told me, and I guess, and Gene's being humble there.
Right.
I mean, he created magic from it because that's what he did. But the ideas were all in Marty's head. And that's the magic of a great copywriter. And that goes to the insatiable curiosity. Number 3 is what I call feedback loops. That, you need, like, and if you're interviewing a copywriter, for instance, it's like one of the questions should always be, who do you hang out with and why? Who do you, like, you asked me like to rattle off the copywriters. I mean, it's not strange bedfellows. It's the people you want to be in bed with. Like, who do you want to learn from? Who do you want to run your copy by? And, you can't write copy by committee. We all know that. But once your first draft is ready, whether it's done by a bot or not, whether it's done by Chat GPT or it's actually written by you, you need to have people that you trust who are at your level who can give you the truth. Like, they got to tell you the truth with love not leaving the room, right? They got to be able to tell you what's, where the copy's flawed and what you can do to improve it. That's the base level of feedback loops. I would go further, and I know you're involved in mastermind groups of copywriters or in forums of copywriters, or you go to like all the, when Stefan Georgi and Justin Goff are holding a copy accelerator high level meeting. I know you're there, and a lot of people are there, and I've been there. And so that's what you want. And all the copywriters, they all were kind of loners, for the most part, but they knew that. I mean, Jim Rutz may be an exception. He didn't get out much, but he had a good sense of what was going on in the world. But Gene Schwartz is the perfect example. I mean, they weren't mastermind groups for copywriters back then, but he used to say that, if you're not out in the world, like just seeing what's happening. I mean, his favorite magazine was National Enquirer. He really wanted to know what America was thinking. And he really wanted to know, and he also read academic journals too, reading everything, just being so passionate about it. And that's about, that's part of the feedback loops. It's part of insatiable curiosity. It's part of hunger, but they're all wrapped together. Number 4 is passion. And again, it's related to the first 3, but passion, knowing a category like the back of your hand, is so valuable. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be a diversified copywriter and be able to write on many topics, but all of the best copywriters started in one particular niche, and they just went 5 miles deep, and they became the expert in a particular niche. And that made them so much better when they branched out. Now, some writers are just like unicorns. I mean, they can just, write about everything immediately, and they're just superhuman. I think for people listening who think they're talented, I'm assuming everybody listening to this is probably a talented writer if they're following you, they need to understand that, if they can dominate a niche, that is as important as being a generalist in a lot of different categories. And it's actually better because you could be the go-to person for a certain area of health, for instance, or a certain area in financial, or a certain area in, home repair or real estate or, stock picking, whatever it is. Being a go-to person in a category is sort of like step 1, and almost all the great writers did that. And it was because they had passion in a certain area. I don't recommend, you have to fake the passion to be able to get into it. And the best writers can do that too. But you're much better off going in an area where you're really passionate about it and then become the expert. Number 5 is super important, and where you become the trusted advisor. And that's understanding direct marketing principles, like understanding the marketing side, understanding lists and audiences and media. Because if you're going to just write in a vacuum, you're going to write, obviously writing copy for Facebook is very different than writing a 24-page magalog, which is different than writing a script for an hour-long VSL. And, you need to understand the different media you're writing for. The writing has some similarities, sure. But, I had somebody, a beginning writer ask me the question that you get probably all the time, long copy versus short copy, or, it's got to be compelling copy. It's got to be compelling copy for the medium. It's got to be compelling copy for the audience you're writing for. You have to use language the audience understands and knows well. And so that's step 1. And then understanding lists, understanding lifetime value. And, when you write something, even if it's for cold traffic, understanding that there's going to be a second offer coming behind that. And you're writing for the second offer when you're writing for the first offer. You don't want to be a one-off writer. You don't want to be like writing for a bunch of one-offs. I mean, John Carlton was always great on this. He used to say a promotion is not a business. These guys that had the best selling product, a promotion on ClickBank or on some of the affiliate networks, they think they had a business. No, they had a winning promotion. They made money, but that's not a business. A business is having 2, 3 related products in a category and be able to sell the second product when you're selling the first, or right after you sell the first, and not just like on a pop-up and an upsell, but you're actually selling into the second product without selling the second product when you're selling the first. So you can lose money on the first and make money on the second. And now you've calculated some lifetime value, whatever the lifetime might be. Hopefully you can, at Boardroom, we had subscriptions and we wouldn't make money on a new subscription until year 3. But that was calculated because we had stored up some money by making money on the first year early in our business. And then we decided to invest in the business. And that was the point, was that you could lose money on the first or second order, but you make it back on the third. And that's how you accumulate wealth. And that's how you create a business and not just a promotion or a product. Understanding that the 3-legged stool of direct marketing, list, media, audience, offer is 2, and the messaging is 3, being able to segment those so you can not isolate them so they can work together. And you need to do them in order. You need to have the audience dialed in first, then you get your offer, and then the creative comes last. I always say the creative and the messaging and the copywriting is the least important until it's not. Because once you have your lists and your offer, your media and your offer dialed in, then you should really focus on the creative, because the creative and the copy is the one thing that could take it to new heights. Every major breakthrough I ever had at Boardroom in any of our products was always due to a new writer writing a new package from scratch that went through the roof. Did I get lifts in response by doing mailing some new lists and some new segments of lists? Yes. Did I get increases in responses by changing the offer and changing the bonuses and changing the premiums and changing the price and all of that? Of course. But it was the creative that took it to new heights, because I was a list guy more than a copywriter. So the copywriters loved me because I was giving them a list that was just, it was like on a silver platter, and they were the best writers. So it was a great marriage. And I always used to say that, their copy only worked because I gave them the best list, but it's not true. And then the sixth item is humility. I think that the best writers, you have to have ego, but there's a thin line between arrogance and confidence. And it's the arrogant writer that doesn't become the A-lister until quite a ways down the road when they've had a good track record. And that starts with humility. If anybody's followed the career of Gary Bencivenga, he's probably American. He's kind of retired now, except for his olive oil business. But if anybody ever met him or followed him, they would know that he's the most humble guy, and he had an 85%, success rate in the jungle called direct mail, financial and health writing, with going against the other best writers of all time. And he had an 85 to 90% success rate. And then the seventh thing is like, it's your work, like your track record. And it's interesting because when you interview a copywriter or you talk to a copywriter, usually they say, "Oh, let me show you my portfolio." And I made portfolio and your work number 7 of 7. Not that it's not important. I want to go to their website. I want to see what they've done, all of that. But I wanted, it's the first 6 things, it's the hunger, the curiosity, that they have feedback loops, that they have passion, that they understand direct marketing, and that they're humble. All of those are wrapped up. And chances are, if they have those 6, their portfolio is going to be stellar. So that, I probably went too long on that, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what I came up with after studying all these writers who became my friends. Like today, I'm so grateful that, I'm close friends with, not just in business, with Paris Lampropoulos and David Deutsch, because they're just wonderful guys. And we can talk shop because they understand marketing and I understand copy.
Yeah, that was amazing. I'm totally fine that was long because you basically wrote an entire book. And if anybody listening is taking notes, you probably just got 10 times smarter. So
thank you.
That was great. There's like so many times
they're in my book and over deliver, but yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk about the book in a moment, but there was so many times where I was like, "Oh, that's so good. And that's so good." And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to let you talk because that is the best summary. But one thing that a lot of people ask me is like, "Hey, where did you learn the stuff that you know?" So obviously for you learned it, through experience, 34 years at Boardroom, and you working with all these amazing copywriters. And it's almost like I'm interviewing a lot of copywriters at once right now, even though I'm talking to a marketer. But prior to working at Boardroom in 1981, like, how did you get into this whole industry?
Good question. Like a lot of people in the early 80s in direct marketing and the list business, we sort of fell into it. And where I was dropped, like from 30,000 feet into this pit, was like the most amazing. I just stepped in shit. It was like so amazing what I was given. And so a lot of it was luck where I was placed. Once you're placed, you got to make the most of it. And so I'll cover both of those things. But when I was in college, I didn't think of myself. I knew I was an extrovert. I knew that. I knew I liked to write. I was an English major, but I didn't know what direct marketing was. I took a marketing 101 course at my school, Rutgers. And I actually went back in 1989 to teach a full semester of direct marketing because they weren't teaching direct marketing. And I came back and said, "I'll teach a full course in direct marketing." And I had all the experts that I had met over my first 9 years come in and teach the class from a practical standpoint. Because direct marketing is a practical area of marketing. It's measurable, it's accountable. You have to have an ROI on everything you do. Whereas general advertising, general marketing is, it's, do a TV ad and hope people come to the store or whatever. It doesn't have, a calls to action. It doesn't have response devices. So in my marketing book at Rutgers, it was like a paragraph that mentioned direct marketing. And I'm like, I didn't even remember it when I interviewed at Boardroom. So I interviewed at Boardroom and I thought I was going to be a writer. I was probably content writing, not fiction, probably nonfiction. And so I interviewed, and the interview was not for an editorial job. We published books and newsletters, but I was taking any interview because my first job was working for a play publisher making $9,000 a year. So if you're making $9,000 a year and living in your parents' house, you'll take an interview for anything. And you'll take an interview for scrubbing the bathroom with a toothbrush. So I got this interview at Boardroom, and I said, oh, a publisher, that would be good. So I went to Boardroom, and the job was to be the in-house list manager for the Boardroom lists. And I'm like, what is that? And I had to sell myself to get this job. And I found it fascinating. It was like, basically what it was is that the subscriber list to Boardroom and the people who bought Boardroom books, all through direct mail. This is 1981, no internet, no email, nothing. But these names, Boardroom had newsletter, they didn't take advertising. So magazines made their money by taking advertising. A newsletter didn't get advertising. So how do you make money on the audience that you're reaching? It was through the lists, through direct mail. And so I realized that this was a huge industry. And everybody used the Boardroom list because Boardroom's lists were executives. They were mostly at home address. They were rich. They were affluent. They were almost all over 55 years old, which is a great demographic even today because it's people who have time and money. And so I'm thinking, and they all bought through direct mail. So people who want to sell through the mail want people who already bought through the mail. They're called response lists as opposed to compiled lists, which is the phone book with data on top. So the response list of Boardroom, everybody used the list, from Money Magazine to Consumer Reports to Rodale Books to Disabled American Veterans to the National Republican Senatorial Committee to Brookstone Catalog. Everybody used the Boardroom list. So the reason why I said I stepped in this world, I was dropped in this world, is that everybody came to me in the industry to get our lists. And because we were an in-house list manager, as opposed to having our lists with an outside company, because there were companies that call list managers that would manage a lot of lists. So Money Magazine, for instance, the subscriber list to Money Magazine was managed at a company that managed a lot of other magazine lists, not Boardroom. We managed it in-house. So I was the representative of the board. I was the only place you could get it. And so I was like hobnobbing, selling lists, renting lists to mailers and list brokers. And I met all the mailers, met all the list brokers. And I didn't realize at the time that I was developing not just it wasn't just networking. Networking, I hate the term networking. I was creating connections through contributions to them. And I realized, I don't know where I picked it up. I must have picked up the idea that, having the most friends and having the most contacts is not who wins. It's having who has the deep relationships that wins. And, years later, when Joy Abraham became my mentor in the mid 1980s, he used to talk in terms of relationship capital. He didn't talk in terms of networking or list or your contacts. And so, I developed relationship capital, and I didn't even know what I was doing, but I knew I was doing good stuff because I got all the other list managers together, the ones who managed their list in-house. What I created was a mastermind. I didn't even know I was creating a mastermind, not a paid mastermind for $25,000, but I wanted to get ideas from other managers, my competitors. And competition was coexistence in the list business. If my list worked and your list worked, we both get business from the same mailer or list broker. So I realized, and so how did I do it? I did it because I just was exploring where I was, and I think anybody can do it. You explore where you are and you go on the road and you just, you see where the opportunities lead you. And what it did was, it wasn't all about, and I always say that, and I say it today more than ever with online marketing, I say everything is not a revenue event, but everything is a relationship event. And I think I've lived by that. I didn't have that expression until probably 10 years ago, but I think I was living that without realizing back in the 80s, because I realized that just because most list managers, all they did was met with list brokers to get business. The brokers would have all the mailers. They'd say, okay, list manager, tell me what list all my clients should mail. I'm not dealing directly with the other list managers. I went after the other list managers, that my competitors who were also selling, because I wanted to see what the competition looked like. And frankly, I mean, I'm not saying this to brag. I was the best list manager in the country. And it was not because the competition wasn't that stiff, not because I was some genius, but I really understood what it was to get into the mind of my client, which was the mailer, not necessarily the list broker. And I did that by talking about the lists from the packages that got the names onto the list. And fast forward to today, it's the same thing. A list of email subscribers, buyers, whatever, online buyers, they are going to be judged and used, whether you're using them as an affiliate or you're buying them, by what they did, what they bought, how they bought, what kind of promotion did they respond to. That I was already into that in 1985 with no internet. I've been able to transpose that into the industry today, and it's all the same principles. It's, you know, it's how they respond, how you sell is how they respond. Like, why is the affiliate business so powerful? It's because you go to affiliates that sell. The best affiliates are always the ones who sell like you do, who think like you do, and they can sell your product as well as you can sell it. It's the same principle. And so, you know, it was a journey. And of course, you know, I did read a lot of books. I read Joe Sugarman Triggers. I read Breakthrough Advertising, and I didn't understand it until the fifth time I read it. I did better having lunches with Gene Schwartz in his apartment, you know, learning how he thought. And then I was able to decipher what Breakthrough Advertising was all about. I mean, I read Claude Hopkins' Scientific Advertising. I mean, I used to remember Clayton Makepeace, may he rest in peace, one of the great copywriters, one of the great teachers of copywriting. I never saw him make a speech without mentioning classic books that everybody should read, even though they may be a little dated. Breakthrough Advertising is not dated. It's 100% relevant. Claude Hopkins has some stuff that might be a little dated. Ogilvy on Advertising has some stuff that might be a little dated, but they're all worth reading. I mean, even Dick Benson's book, which I have as a full PDF, it's not in Dick Benson was probably the #1 genius of direct mail when I was doing direct mail, one of my mentors. He wrote a book, Secrets of Successful Direct Mail, out of print, but one of the bonuses with Over Deliver when you buy it is a full PDF of that book. So some online marketer would be saying to themselves, why do I want a copy of The Secrets of Successful Direct Mail? Well, you do want it because, yes, there's some stuff that's a little dated, but it's amazing how many rules of thumb of direct mail follow into today's marketplace. And so that I have a PDF of that book as a bonus for buying my book Over Deliver, which is not just about direct mail. So it was such a good question, Troy. It was like, I didn't know where to start and where to end with that question, because I was the easiest way to answer is I got lucky and I was dropped on a planet called direct marketing, list management, understanding your audience, understanding your media. And I just ran with that. At full steam ahead. And I guess the fact that I've spent 40 plus years, not in repetition. So it's not 1 year's experience for 40 years, but I've turned it into 40 years of accumulated knowledge by staying a student all the time. I will, you know, all my mentors used to say, when you stop learning, you might as well die. You know, I'll never stop learning, you know? I mean, when you did your presentation for Titan's Accelerator, I mean, I'm taking notes. I really did. I mean, it was a great presentation.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was great. And I say that to anybody who shares their genius, because nobody can know everything. Some people think they know everything. You got to run away from those people.
That's true. Yeah. Now, that was amazing too. And I think my favorite part, actually two favorite parts. So one, you keep using the phrase list management. That gets me excited because it's like an email paramedic. We just manage email lists all day. And you're over here talking about like pre-email, and it gets me excited for one. Second thing is I like how this started as like, gosh, I need a job And then it turned into this crazy path that you probably could have never imagined your life going down and just excelling at to a very high degree. And it's cool to see how you just took it and ran with it and made it your own and took it very seriously when, prior to getting that job, maybe you were not totally sure where you were going to be and what you were going to do. So I think that's a testament to, hard work and persistence and many of the 7 traits that we just talked about earlier. So you walk the walk. Now, we got a few
thank you,
minutes
Troy. I
left here.
appreciate that. I would also say that if you look at those 7 traits, they're actually, you could say that they're the traits that every great marketer has, as well as copywriter.
True. Yeah, for sure.
They do. And
We've
I
got,
hope that as a marketer, I hope that I have those. Anytime I can, anybody who ever says, I tell you, what the most satisfying thing after being in the business for 40 years is, and I really will say this, when someone says to me or calls me their mentor, and it's weird because it's a word, but because I revere my mentors, and in fact, I've been told by some people that, I give other people too much credit for my education. I give too much other people, but I don't see it that way because we're all like a conglomeration of everything we've learned, everything we've taken in. And so when someone says that I'm their mentor in some area of their career, that's the highest compliment they can pay me. And it feels so good because I don't strive to be a mentor, but if I can be, I actually, I always say I've never invented anything, but I've innovated on some things, or I've expressed concepts that people didn't understand until they heard me express them. That is something that we all should revel in, because if more people get the understanding and you become the messenger for that understanding, whether it's in copywriting, marketing, anything, it's sort of like if I think teachers and professors get this jolt probably that, when the kid gets geometry from you, they didn't invent geometry, but you see a kid, the light bulb goes on. And then that teacher becomes, someone who they think about, 15, 20 years later in their life. It's the same thing in your career, right? I mean, and I want to be one of those people for a lot of people, because I have so many of them and I've been so fortunate. And it's only because I always say you can't choose it's always best when your mentors choose you. Like you don't want to, because I get emails all the time and I'm sure you do too, Troy, will you be my mentor, in what you do? And it's like, it doesn't work that way. I can if everybody who asks me, but, I'll tell you a quick story, and it involves a copywriter. So Jim Rutz, when he died, I was close with him. I don't know if I was his closest client, but I was close to it. So he died, and his sister called me. In fact, his sister called me. I was sitting at home writing a blog post on my kitchen table about Jim's passing. And all of a sudden the phone rings and it's Ginger Rutz. I'm like, that's weird. Like, is Jim still alive? Who's Ginger? And I pick up the phone. It's Jim Rutz's sister, Ginger Rutz. And she goes, Brian, you don't know me, but Jim always spoke so highly of you, and I'm going through his stuff here. I said, yeah, I know he just passed away. You must be very sad. And I did the condolences thing. And she said, I want to talk to you after I get out of my sadness, that I have everything he's ever written in like 4 boxes, everything he's ever collected, every letter he's ever written during his career. And that she called me because I consider Jim one of those, Mount Rushmore copywriters. Just that she called me was not that I could have died then and been happy, but I could have almost, because it was like, wow, I touched Jim enough for me to be the first phone call to kind of deal with Jim's archives, basically.
Right.
And what that led to is, 2 years later, but during it, when I talked about that in my eulogy in my blog for Jim Rutz, I said, I'm going to be getting all of Jim's stuff. And if there's anybody in my online family that was a Jim Rutz fan, or, I knew I had a lot of copywriters in my online family on my list, and so on my email list. So I said, if anybody wants to join me, or anybody has some interest, I'll probably need a lot of help. I didn't say for money. I didn't say for anything. And 3 copywriters came out of the woodwork from my list, and they were big Jim Rutz fans. They had followed Jim Rutz. One of them was like pretty young too, which was really cool. When you see somebody that's following somebody that wasn't alive when they, that's the satisfaction I get with Gene Schwartz now. The people that follow him that didn't know him, and I can be the bridge to Gene Schwartz. And so these 3 guys ended up doing like the heavy lifting on scanning everything. They did some of the critiques of the packages. And of course, Ginger did a lot of stuff also. And we ended up with this product that's called Read This or Die. It's all of his stuff, over 200 packages. There's also a section in it that's called Jim Rutz's Furniture. And it was basically, when I went to Jim Rutz's house, his living room didn't have any furniture. I think it had like 1 chair and a table. And all around the perimeter of the room were piles of direct mail. And you go around and there's the Rodale pile, there's the Boardroom pile, there's the Agora pile. These are all the mailers at the time. There's the Phillips pile, there's the KCI pile. These are all the newsletter publishers and all the book publishers. And he basically kept all of the packages that he wrote, but all the packages that were his favorites that he worked with as his swipe files. But I said, so the section in Read This or Die is Jim Rutz's Furniture and those are the packages that he cherished and why he cherished them. And so the point I'm trying to make is that those 3 copywriters, if I said at the end of the project, I sent them some money. They did not ask for money. I sent them on the first sales. I sent them what's akin to a royalty. I sent Ginger a royalty that she wasn't expecting, that was more than she was expecting. I haven't sold a ton of them, but I've sold, maybe $10,000 or $15,000 worth, and I gave most of it to them. And so I said to these 3 guys when I sent them the check, I said, I don't know if you want me to be a mentor to you, if you want me to be in your lives after this, but anything you ask me for in the future that I can help you with, I'll be there. And that's how your mentors choose you. Now, some people you do favors for, or you do stuff for free, and they don't do squat for you. But when I got 2 of my mentors, Gene Schwartz and Dick Benson, came about because both of them became my mentors after I just, no money, just 100%. I'm going to help you with your list selection in your businesses. Dick Benson had a newsletter business, contest newsletter, and the University of California, Berkeley Wellness Letter. He had 2 big newsletters. His list broker, I thought, was doing a lousy job because Dick showed me his list plan. So I gave him all the best health lists that Boardroom used, and the selections that I used, and I became his de facto list broker who came up with a much better list plan than his list broker did. Gene Schwartz, the same thing. Gene Schwartz had a little book publishing company called Instant Improvement. Little books like the Tao of Sexology and How to Rub Your Stomach Away. Great stuff. Like little books for $15. And his list broker wasn't doing a good job. And Gene and I used to go through his list plan, and I said, don't take that selection, take this. I just became his list broker because I knew all the lists that he should be using, and I wasn't even a list broker because he uses the same list. In fact, a lot of people know this story because I've written about it. It's in my book, and I've written a blog about it. Gene Schwartz understood lists. He was like, that's what got me to the whole thing about a copywriter that understands direct marketing, because Gene Schwartz, I never paid him a dime for the copy he wrote, world-class copy. Neither did Rodale Press, which was the biggest health book publisher at the time. But I had big list of health books. Rodale had a big list of health books. Gene had no list of health book buyers because he had little books that he only sold 10,000 at a time. So Gene used to charge 750,000 names, Boardroom names and Rodale names, to write a package for us. And people, I couldn't, if I paid him $100,000 to write a package for us, it wouldn't have equaled what he made on the 750,000 names, because he understood that the 750,000 names would multiply once he mailed them multiple times. And then all the buyers of his books would then become the list that he would mail and be their best buyers of other of his books. He understood that. How many copywriters understood that?
Right.
Very
Playing
few.
the long
And how many
game.
copywriters today understand that concept? I don't know.
Yeah.
You understand it, but
Yeah, you definitely like, I think a lot of this too is, especially if you're a copywriter listening, you can't just be a copywriter. Like, sure, it's your main skill, but you have to understand all the things going on around the copy. So again, like with email list management, what we teach, it's like, hey, you're not just writing the copy, you're understanding deliverability and automation, the strategy, and like the whole ecosystem. So, Brian, this has been amazing. And so many awesome stories and tactical notes and things that really mean a lot, and like diving deep into relationships. I think you have a lot of different ways for people to contact you, but you also mentioned your book and all the bonuses that come with it. And if you just want to take a second and let people know where they can get more stories like this, that would be amazing.
Thank you. I think the best way, and it's free, and everybody likes free, is go to briankurtz.net. There's an opt-in on the first page, on the homepage. You sign up there, you get on my list, and you become a member of my online family. And I truly treat them like a family. I don't do affiliates. I sell my own products, but they're all educational products. You don't have to buy anything. I usually sell them in a PS, because my blogs are mostly just content and stories and lessons that I'm learning. I've learned and I'm still learning, because I'm on an ongoing quest to keep learning about everything in my mastermind groups, everything in my, everywhere I go in the industry, what I learned from you, what I learned from the online email folks, the online Facebook folks, the online Google AdWords folks. So I just do a lot in my blog about what I'm learning. And so get on my list. You don't have to buy anything ever. There's a lot of free content on the site. So that's the easiest way, briankurtz.net. If you want to buy one of my books, I highly recommend it, not because I make any money on it. I mentioned to Troy before he turned the recording on that, I got an advance on my book Over Deliver, and I haven't made back the advance yet. So I'm not making any money on selling books. However, if you go to overdeliverbook.com, you'll go to a site that is just filled with amazing bonuses. A lot of the stuff I've talked about today, the Dick Benson book in PDF form. I have 19 keynote speeches that you can access from Jay Abraham. There's a swipe file from Dan Kennedy that he developed for my Titans of Direct Response event in 2014. I have all of the Gary Bencivenga bullets in one PDF. I have a swipe file that goes back to the year 1900, 400 pages worth. So it's just an amazing swipe file, because I wrote a book called Over Deliver. I thought that I had to over deliver on the bonuses. So if you go there, there's 3 steps. There's a button. You go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble, wherever you want to buy the book. You come back to the site. You sign in with the order number, and then you can access all of these bonuses. The book's like $20 to $27. I don't even know how much it is. I think there's a soft cover now too.
It's not enough, that's for sure.
So I always say the bonuses are worth a lot more than my book.
Right.
Overdeliverbook.com. My first book, The Advertising Solution, is a neat book too, because I wrote it with Craig Simpson, and we profiled 6 legends of advertising, madmen of advertising, who were the direct marketers trapped in general advertisers' bodies. And that was Gary Halbert, Gene Schwartz, John Caples, David Ogilvy, Robert Collier, and Claude Hopkins. And so that one, you go to the legendsbook.com, and it's the same deal. You buy the book, you come back to the site, and there's a swipe file from the 6 legends. There are videos of the 6 legends. There's some cool videos of Gary Halbert teaching. I don't know if anybody knew Gary Halbert. He was one of the great. I never worked with him, so I don't mention him that much, but he's somebody that has mentored so many of the great writers today. I mean, people like Doberman Dan and Sam Markowitz and man, I'm forgetting all the people that, but anyway, Gary Halbert was, he saved Joe Polish's life, with what he taught Joe. But he was just a master of copy, just an amazing, Caleb O'Dowd, who I mentioned before. So anyway, thelegendsbook.com is another way. And you get on my list and get my blog if you do any of those things. And I just love to teach. I love to share. I will engage with you if you're on my list and you email me.
Yes, you do, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. I just love engaging with people on direct marketing topics. And, I guess, this was an interesting, podcast to say yes to, Troy, because, it was really, you had these questions that you sent me that, and we got into some of them, but it's how do you discover copywriting? What forms of copy do you write? What niche copies do you write in? And, I had to go in a whole different direction because I write my blog and it's copywriting, but it's not soup to nuts promotion writing. And so that's where I become a copywriter wannabe. But I just, as I said, I just look up to the copywriters as such heroes to me. And so whenever anybody asks me to be on a copywriter podcast, I always say yes, and I don't know if they know what they're in for. And I hope this was useful and probably a little different than some of your other interviews, which are all probably great. I have to go take a listen to some of them. But I just hope it was a little off the beaten track, I think.
Yeah, it's good. So, for context, I recently put out an article about the 44 most popular copywriters of 2022. So basically asked people who their favorite is.
I saw
and all
that.
the answers
Yes.
are based on it. And there were a couple of people that put you. And so it made the honorable mention section. And there were a lot of other great marketers that didn't really identify as copywriters, but they still got a couple votes. So I was like, you know what? Like, I've talked to you before. I might as well have you on here because I enjoy talking to you and you're really smart. So I was like, you know what? Let's just get on a podcast. And if we can fill in the written answers somehow, we'll do it. But either way, more people need to listen to your stories and knowledge and all that stuff. So thank you so much for coming on here. And
thank you, Troy. The pleasure was mine. And I just want you to know, I learned the reason why I said yes in a heartbeat is because I learned so much from you when you were on talking to my mastermind. And keep doing what you're doing. You're one of the heroes in the online marketing space. And anything I can do for you in the future, I can be available. And whether you want it or not, I've already chosen you as somebody who I want to follow and I want to stay in touch with. So thank you, Troy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And also thanks to everybody for listening. This is the Secrets of Scale podcast. And of course, copywriting.org has got so many amazing interviews on there. And in December 2022, we had 170,000 page views. So I am super pumped to keep that growing. So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.